So 150 different types of neurons were painted and many examples of each and scanned into the computer. And the right image is of them being vectorized. So they're turned into math, which is the kind of realm we're in after this point. Once we had these libraries of neurons, we were able to assemble all of the gray matter regions, paint them using programs in vector. And here, this is just a small region of the cerebral cortex, which is the covering of your brain, that kind of wrinkly structure. And there's maybe a couple thousand neurons here, and all of the gray matter was painted via this method. But the gray matter is only half of the story, because the other half of your brain by weight is the white matter, which are the connections between the neurons. If you look at a slice in the brain, you'll notice it's a little bit paler. They're the highways which information travels up and down. So we based a lot of this on some brain scans that were given to us by some colleagues at Carnegie Mellon University, but ended up painting it all by scratch in the end to interface with the algorithm. At this point, we already have pretty much the most complicated illustration of the brain, and it's just in 2 dimensions. There's maybe 1 million or slightly less neurons in it. But what we did next really transformed things and brought it to the next level, which is how do we put causative relationships into these neural circuits? How can we actually emulate and simulate how the brain is functioning? So the basic unit of how we did this is that we started with these gray matter regions, the cell bodies. We told the algorithm, we want you to start with these cells, we want you to connect up to these axons, and we want you to synapse on the final cell bodies. This is one step in a neural choreography, we call them. And we have about 600 of these steps of neural choreography, each of which is controlled by about 30 variables, which are doing things like how fast is the action potential moving, how much chaos is there in the connections, are the neurons firing as a burst or are they firing one by one? So tons of control, and as Brian would say, plenty of rope to hang yourself with if you are giving yourself too many options. But this is the output of what the algorithm makes. So it's sequencing things in time. It knows that neuron 1 is starting at time equals 0, and that there's a time associated with its action potential moving along its axon to the next spot. So what you're looking at here is a map of time. Anything that you see in a red pixel would be visible all the way to the left of the etching. And then as you walk in this direction, you would see the orange, the yellow, the green, the blue, and the violet all the way to the right. So if we zoom in on a small region of it, this is actually the motor cortex, which is this piece right here. If you zoom in on a small region of it, this is the actual data that's coming out of a different set of algorithms that we designed for this. And what this algorithm is doing is it's saying, where is this pixel in XY space on the canvas? Where's the light source it's being illuminated with? Where, based upon its color, is it going to be reflecting that light? And based upon that, we can calculate the math as to what angle we need to make an etch at that spot in order to send the photons exactly where we want them to go. So the algorithm calculates this for the entire piece and then uses vector calculus to align all of these etches into this type of image. So this is about 30 gigs worth of binary data that was printed onto transparencies at ultra high resolution that we use to do the photolithography, which is a technique wherein light is used to carve into surfaces in 3 dimensions. It's similar to how computer microchips are made. So using this technique, we created the micro-etched surface that we then figured out some ways to apply gold leaf to the surface to increase the reflectivity, because these images or the pieces of art are completely based upon reflected light. So we hand apply gold leaf to the surface. In the case of self-reflectors, there's about 2,000 sheets of it, and 25 individual panels that were assembled and cut down into this compilation. This is 9 of them tiled up against one another. That's Brian in the picture. And this is what the final piece looks like under a single white light. But remember that this piece can appear in an infinite number of ways. So all you need to do is change the color of the lights and you get a totally different looking image. And in fact, at the Franklin Institute, there's a series of lights which are kind of going on and off of this. This is of the thalamus, which is this piece right here. This is kind of like the master control of the brain. It's right at the very center. It's routing all sorts of perceptual and emotional memory-based information and is important for giving us conscious experience. Here's the cerebellum under a multicolored light. This is the frontal eye fields, which helps you to direct your eyes towards specific stimuli, the parietal cortex, and a zoom in of the gyrus. The gyrus is the outcropping, the wrinkled part of your brain. What this image is telling you and kind of reminding you of is that when you're filling up the etch bandwidth, if you will, with colored light, you can kind of see how the animation will proceed over time. You can see, for example, that all the red neurons are functioning as one unit of processing, and that the information is traveling up and down through the different regions of cortex. This one is called movement and sensation. This is actually a print in the back here. And the left gyrus, movement, and the one to the right is involved in somatosensation, or your touch sensation. And another one of the brainstem and cerebellum. That's what the piece looks like in situ at the Franklin. And one of the questions I was asking myself after 2 years of making this damn thing was, why? And the best reason is, imagine a little kid going into space and standing in front of this gigantic glittering gold surface and having that light straight over it for the first time, and 500,000 neurons just blaze into activity. And for that kid, just for an instant, to look up at it and just say, wow. That emotional connection is everything, everything. Our emotions are what is driving us. We like to think that it's our intellect which is in control, but that is not the case. I mean, from a neuroscientific perspective, the limbic system, the emotions, evolved way, way sooner. And the connections which are actually changing our perceptions based upon our emotions are very strong within us, whether or not we realize it. And the power of art, the unique power of it, is that you can communicate these types of complex subject materials through it. I can scream and yell all day. The brain has 86 billion neurons. And you're like, who gives a shit? I don't even know what that means. It's like a meaningless, dry fact. But if you show somebody what 500,000 of them looks like all at once, then it's like, oh, I'm getting a little bit of what that means. Even though this is hundreds of million times less complicated than it actually is. I mentioned that I'm interested in consciousness. And this was an attempt to kind of gather scientific materials and to bring it into the realm of art, to the realm of my kind of subjective interpretation of it to some degree. And at the same time, I'm interested in studying the brain from the other perspective, which is through my subjective experience and trying to express that as well. And this piece, Pranayama, is hanging right over here. So I've been a meditator for about 15 years, and I have a sensory deprivation tank in my house. And after years of practice, you start to develop it's like a new sense for this material called prana, this energy that's very subtle. You have to be very still to feel it in your body. And little by little, you start to feel it more, and you learn how to control it using your breath. And it's a very abstract concept, and it's particularly difficult to explain to scientists who look at you with very skeptical eyes when you're talking about such a thing. But I encourage you to do the experiment yourself. And what I wanted to do with this piece is to essentially map where the prana moves in my body when I'm doing this exercise. And so the density of the tendrils is correlated with how finely I feel this energy moving in the body. And at the point between the eyebrows in particular is the point at which you feel, it's almost as if the outside and the inside annihilate one another, and you enter into this space where there's just nothing there at all. And the concept here, and what you'll see when you move back and forth between the piece, is that this figure is breathing in meditation. Again, pranayama is the control of prana through breath. So in this image right here, the figure is inhaling. Here comes the exhale. The prana is moving up the central channel and out. Here's the inhale. Here's the inhale and the exhale. And this piece is really meant to be a reminder to bring our mind back to the present. And remember that that's always a good idea, to keep your mind calm, because that's the time in which connections are made. You know, it's also the time when you catch that stupid little voice in the back of your mind that's just irritating you. Just like, all right, I see you're there. You can stop now.